Hello and welcome to the next episode of Once Upon a Time in Addiction. I'm Mike Murray, I'm your host. You're very welcome and I'm very glad to have you here. Don't forget to hit the follow button if you are listening on Spotify, or you can download as well to listen to at any time you please. So, as I said, you're very welcome, and if you are still suffering out there, if you are an addict who is struggling or suffering, don't forget, reach out to somebody. You are not a bad person, you just have an addiction. So what I wanted to touch on today very much was codeine addiction. So I think this is a really important part of speaking about addiction nowadays. It's not just all about cocaine anymore, ecstasy, any of those other drugs. Codeine addiction has become part and parcel of what it is to be an addict. Unfortunately, it is widely available. You can get it in any pharmacy, and anybody can become addicted to pain medication. I found that out the hard way myself, and that is what I wanted to talk about today. A couple of years ago, I suffered from dental pain, and I was having an awful lot of problems with my teeth. My teeth were absolutely aching. I was constantly getting infections and so on and so forth. I never really considered codeine or painkillers to be a real drug, if I'm completely honest with you, because I had been out there on what you would have called the hard stuff. The likes of pain medication stuff, to me, I thought there wasn't a buzz in it. Sure, why would I want to take that? That's not going to do anything for me. So I was prescribed pain medication for my teeth, and started taking it. Initially, it got rid of the pain. I didn't feel any effects of it other than the fact it had managed to actually get rid of the pain in my teeth. But what I started doing then was I started to take it to nearly preempt the pain coming. So I was convinced, right, if I take this now, I won't actually be in pain. I've somewhere to go today, I've things to do, can't afford to be getting a toothache today, so I'll just take something here now and that'll get me through the day. So that's how it sort of began. And then after that, probably a couple of weeks had passed and I was still taking it. Started to notice I felt very relaxed when I was taking it. I felt at the time that, my anxiety probably wasn't as bad either. And I started thinking, you know what, this stuff's not too bad. Started sleeping a lot easier at night. I was falling asleep, and I thought, Jesus, this stuff is very relaxing to be taken. And sure, what harm? If anything, it's stopping me from getting these toothaches or whatever. And sure, you can get it from the chemist. It can't be that bad. A couple of months passed. I was still on it. And then at that point, I started to notice I was starting to crave it. So a couple hours would pass after taking it, and then I was starting to get a bit cranky, starting to get a little bit irritable and stuff like that. And it was starting to become a problem for me at that point. I was probably in the pharmacist every single day buying a box of, whether it was a combination of ibuprofen and codeine or paracetamol and codeine, like cocodamol or one of them things. And after a couple of months, I was doubling up. I was buying both of them, cocodamol and the likes of your Norphin Plus and all that sort of stuff. And I was taking them both at the same time so as I could up the dose of codeine. So this went on and on for a while. All the while, I was convinced that it's not a drug. So, realistically, I'm not doing any harm. I thought that my recovery was still intact. I thought, you know what, I'm not taking cocaine, therefore I'm still in recovery. I was only fooling myself, to be honest with you. Got to the point where I was spending an absolute fortune on this stuff. The thing about here in the north of Ireland is that when you go into a pharmacist and you ask for it, normally what they do is they'll just say 3 days use only and take your money. In the south of Ireland, I was at home once. I took a trip home and I hadn't got any, and I went into the pharmacist and your man gave me 20 questions. And I remember standing there going, oh shit, this guy's on to me here. I remember thinking, right, this isn't just as easy to get here. And I gotta be honest, in that moment, that was a real moment of clarity for me, because I felt ashamed when he was asking me the questions, because I knew I didn't need it. And that was whenever I thought, you know what, right, I feel exactly as low and as shameful as I did when I was using cocaine. Standing here in front of this person, I felt like he was judging me, and it was at that point then I knew, right, you have a problem here, you need to get off this stuff. But I didn't. I came home and I continued on. But then, because I knew I had a problem with it, all that addiction stuff where with the guilt and the shame, all of that was all over me every single day that I continued to use it. I felt like I'd broken a promise to my wife, because I always remember, I first got proper recovery, whenever my wife was pregnant on her first child. And I said, that's it, I'm done, I will never use, as long as I have kids, that's it, there's no way I would ever use her, And I felt like I'd broken that promise, and which I did, So this went on, to be honest with you, it went on for a long time. And what I didn't realise at the time was I wasn't healthy in recovery, I was still trying to numb some sort of pain or some sort of feelings. I was still trying to do something with that, and so it continued on for a while, and I just could not seem to get one day. I could not get one day off these painkillers, and I wasn't being honest. I wouldn't admit to anybody, and until I could admit to somebody, I have a problem here, because I was too ashamed. I was too ashamed, and a big part of recovery is admitting that you have a problem. And it's talking to somebody, it's picking up the phone. But I couldn't do it because I couldn't bear to tell anybody that I had just lost all of these years of recovery to a painkiller. And I always remember being at a meeting probably about 15 years ago. I went to a meeting, and there was a woman in that meeting, and she talked about the fact that she was addicted to pain medication, and that her life was upside down, and she was going around lying to her partner and so on. And I always remember judging that woman. I remember sitting there, I was just after coming off a heavy addiction to, what was it to at the time? It was, do you remember the head shop drugs you could get, the synthetic stuff? I had become heavily hooked on that stuff as well at the time. And I remember I was coming off that, and I was sitting in the meeting, and I was looking at this woman, and I was thinking, you're not an addict. You can't get addicted to painkillers. Sure, there's no buzz off of that. How can you call yourself an addict? And the judgment I gave that woman, it sort of always stayed with me. And then it's almost like the karmic wheel was at play, because I had to go through that myself. I had to experience what that woman was feeling. And now that I've experienced it, the empathy that I have for that poor woman, and you know what, I hope she found recovery. I hope she got well, but it was a real lesson in life for me as well, and Jesus, to sit in a meeting and to judge somebody else. And look, it goes on, because when you're in early recovery, you're still full of ego and you're full of judgment, but you're judging yourself. It's all internal. So eventually, as I said, admitting that I had a problem, that was the first step for me. It was going into a meeting, and it was saying, listen, I'm hooked on these painkillers. I've been taking pain medication. I've relapsed. And that was a game changer for me. And to be honest with you, I've relapsed multiple times on the painkillers. I started getting headaches, and then I had to take them again. It was the only thing that would cure the headache. Normal paracetamol just wasn't doing it for me. And I've had to relapse multiple times to try and get one day again in recovery from pain medication. So if you had told me 20 years ago you're going to get hooked on that stuff, and that's going to be the demon that you're going to have to fight every day, is a painkiller, I would have laughed at you. But this is the demon that I'm fighting now every day. This is my new war, And I think it's very, very sad for so many people that otherwise would never have encountered addiction, didn't come from the same background as a lot of addicts, but still ended up an addict because they had back pain. They were suffering from something. But that's what addiction lives on. It lives on your suffering. That's what feeds it, you know. Addiction is like a monster, and the only thing that will suppress its appetite is your misery, you know. And so what the painkiller industry has done, you know, you look in America, you know, you look at what's going on over there with OxyContin and stuff like that, you know. It's absolutely insane. It's opened up the doors for a whole new generation of people to become addicts, and that to me is sad, and it's also frightening at the same time. That's one addiction. That is one addiction in the larger scale of addiction that one person can have. So first and foremost, you're an addict. What you get addicted to, that's just all filler in between your active addiction. You know, you can get addicted to so much stuff. You can get addicted to painkillers. You can get addicted to, you know, you can get addicted to the gym. You can get addicted to, as I said in the last episode, you get addicted to sex. You can get addicted to so many things, you know. And all along, my God, when I look back now, I have had so many of them. You know, I remember getting addicted to the gym. I remember I was into bodybuilding for a couple of years, and I started, you know, panicking when I'd missed the gym for one day, and I was looking in the mirror and I was thinking, oh, I'm not as big as I was 2 days ago. I was getting like body dysmorphia from it. I was miserable. I hated the gym. I hated going. I didn't want to go, but I felt like I had to go. I felt like I had to maintain an image, and you're just searching for self-worth, you know. And again, it was an addiction. Addicted to sugar. Sugar is, oh my God. See trying to come off sugar, not to eat that big bag of Haribos every night, you know. But these are all the little addictions that you have, and you're in recovery and you're doing well, but you're fighting all these other demons. And look, you can't be a saint. I mean, I love me cup of coffee every morning, and I don't think I could give that up. I really, really don't. In a way, you sort of have to come down off the cross a little bit. It's hard. Recovery is hard, but oh my God, is it worth it? Is it worth it to wake up every morning and not to have that shame and that guilt all over you? To get your spirituality back again, you know? To reconnect with your soul. To feel like, you know what? I'm not a bad person. And that is the life that's waiting out there for you. I'm sure many of you listening in on this, if you suffer from addiction, you know, when you found a bit of recovery, you know exactly what I'm talking about. For those of you that are still suffering out there, this is what's waiting on you. That feeling of getting up every single day and no longer regretting yesterday. No longer looking at your loved one in the eye and feeling like you're lying to them and feeling like you're hiding something from them. Getting your self-respect back. Getting your self-worth back. That's what's waiting for you out there. It's yours if you want it. You can grab that now. You can grab that today. All you have to do is just don't take that drug. It sounds too simple to be true, but it is true. There's a saying in recovery, and it's just do the next right thing. The next right thing for you right now could be to pick up the phone, tell somebody you have a problem, look in the mirror, tell yourself you have a problem, and just don't take that first drug. Delete every single number out of your phone. Anyone that has anything got to do with drugs or alcohol. You know, I talk about drugs. You know, this is my experience. Addiction is addiction. Alcoholism is an addiction. It's harder for alcoholics too in many, many ways, because you have a pub everywhere you go. You know, here in Ireland, oh my God, you know, the pub is the institution. The community is built around the pub. It's very, very difficult, you know. It's very hard for me to say, just don't take that next drink, you know. You could have bottles of whiskey, you could have, you know, cans in the fridge. Very, very hard thing to do is to pour that down the sink. In that case, you make a phone call, you get out of the house, you meet somebody somewhere that doesn't involve a pub, and you have an open and honest conversation. Contact your GP. Speak to your doctor. Get directed in the right way, to the right place to go, to the right people that are going to help you. Because I can tell you now, There is so much help out there. There are people out there that will go on your journey with you. There are friends out there that you're yet to meet that you'll identify with that can help you, and yeah, just don't take that next drug, don't take that next drink. The life beyond your wildest dreams is waiting for you, and it's not what you think it is. It's not a condo in Miami. A life beyond your wildest dreams can be sitting out in your garden and hearing the birds sing for the first time in a year. The fog gone off your brain. Your hands not shaking, your stomach not churning. You can see colour again. That was a big one for me. I never noticed all the colours around me. You never notice the smell of the air after it rains. All that sort of stuff. It's mad. When you're an addict and you're an active addict, the world around you is black and white. There's no colour anymore. You can't hear it, you can't see it, and you can't smell it, because all you can focus on is getting that next drink or drug or whatever it might be. So whenever you find recovery, that whole world is going to open up to you again. My tale in addiction is like many other people's. It's not a fairy tale. It's like a horror style fairy tale. It's like a grim fairy tale. It's horrific, but you can get out of those dark woods. The big bad wolf will stay there. You can find that clearing, and you can get out into the wide open space, and that's where recovery is waiting for you. You don't have to live in the horror anymore. So realistically, that's what I wanted to touch on today, because I don't think there's enough emphasis on the likes of painkiller addiction and stuff like that, especially here in Ireland. It's just too easy to get. So if you're out there and you're suffering, you're taking painkillers, and you're taking them for the sake of taking them, and you're listening in on this, maybe this podcast will help you today. It'll help you to reach out to somebody or reach out to your GP and say, do you know what, I think I have a problem with this, and you'll be able to get the help you need as well. What's helped me very much as well was finding a hobby. That was the big one for me. I never had a hobby in my life, so when I was in active addiction, I couldn't have cared less about, it would have been boring to me to think of not doing anything on a Saturday evening, or sitting watching TV in the evenings. All of that just sounded so mundane. A hobby to me, the thought of going for a walk, going for a run, any of that stuff when I was really bad in active addiction, all of that was just, it's not for me. I just wanted to use. That to me was, my addiction had me convinced that was, this is what life's all about. So the big one for me in the last couple of years was picking up a guitar. I started playing guitar properly about 2 years ago, and that's been a game changer for me. I found it really good for focus whenever you're, if you've anxiety or anything like that. Whenever you're playing guitar, you can't think about the anxiety. You're focusing so much on what you're trying to do, and that's been a big one for me, is the guitar. That definitely has filled the gaps for me. It's filled those spaces where you're sitting there and you have too much time to think. I'll just go and I'll pick that up and I'll practice, and that's been a big help for me, because they say in recovery that you need to stay away from people, places and things that enable you to use, or will give you the want to use. And it's about filling in those gaps with other things, healthy things. That can be meeting people for coffee. It can be starting that routine every week and making a promise to somebody else. Whenever I initially first tried to come off cocaine and stuff like that, the big one for me was making promises to other people. So that would be me saying, listen, I'm going to help you do that. I'm going to help you fix that. If you have something to do in the house, I'm going to help you do that. And I always remember thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do on a Saturday night after work? Work on Saturday is going to be meaningless now, because I've nothing at the end of it to look forward to. So what I was doing there was, instead, I was making a commitment to somebody else and saying, I'll help you with that on Saturday evening, or I'll go and meet you on Saturday evening. I was deleting those numbers off my phone was a big one as well. The little enablers all around you that are enabling your active addiction to continue. And there's a really big subject there as well with addiction, is obviously relationships and addiction and how it affects the other people in your life, because active addiction it's a very, very selfish thing, and there's a lot of people around you suffering while you're there. One of the biggest things I think that you can suffer with is having to watch somebody slowly dismantle their life, slowly push themselves away from you, to cast you out into the cold, because their true love of their life is their drug of choice. And that must be very, very, very difficult, and I didn't experience that, so I can only imagine what that's like. So for anybody listening in that is watching somebody else do this, my heart breaks for you, because as an addict you have to want to stop. Nobody can make you stop, and the idea of stopping for somebody else, it just doesn't work. It really, really doesn't. I tried to stop for my wife. I tried to do it for her, and it still wasn't enough. And whenever I did finally manage to stop, it takes a long time to repair the trust. The trust is the big one. When the trust is gone, trust is not so easily gained back. And you have to work really, really hard. So every time I relapsed, all the trust that I built back up was gone again. And that's one of the most difficult parts of relapse. But you will get it back, because people that love you, they'll give you the time, they'll wait, they'll watch, and the trust will come back. And I think the trust comes back whenever you start to do the normal things again. When you turn up for those appointments, when you show up on time, when you do the things that you say you're going to do. It's all trust building exercises. And the people around you will eventually get used to you doing those things, and the trust just naturally will begin to come back again. And listen, I've said from the beginning of this podcast, from the first episode, that I want this to be an honest podcast. I'm only back in recovery, very, very recently. I relapsed again. So I'm speaking from a place of truth, and I'm speaking from the rawness is still there within me at the moment. As I've said, my Achilles heel in addiction is painkillers, and it's hard for me being back in this position again. I've been in and out of recovery for the last 21 years. I wake up in the morning and I think to myself, 21 years, can you imagine what your life would be like now if you got recovery early, if you had been off it for 21 years. But I'll be honest with you, recovery's recovery. If you can get a week of recovery, you can feel all those things that I've previously spoke about, all those good things. They come back very quickly. You have to give yourself a break. All that recovery time that I've gotten before, it hasn't really disappeared. All the lessons I learned in that, they don't just go away. It's like a very quick and a hard reset for me right now. I'm very, very lucky that I recognize, I need to get back on the saddle here. So for those of you out there listening in thinking that I'm sitting here talking about it like I have it all figured out, I absolutely do not have it all figured out. This podcast is a platform for me, for healing, for me as well. I'm doing this because when I speak on this podcast, recovery is in my mind. And if recovery is always on my mind, I stand a better chance of actually maintaining that recovery. So, so if you're out there and you're just back from a relapse, you'll relate to me and I relate to you, So I think I've touched on a fair bit of stuff there in this episode today. I did want to touch on the codeine stuff because I do think that it's a big part of it. It's a big part of what's going on out there today. What I'd like to do today now before I finish is I would like to do another small 5-minute meditation. So again, for those of you that aren't into the whole meditation buzz, thanks very much for listening in today. Don't forget to hit me a follow, a download, a like, whatever it may be. It'll all help to build this podcast because that's what I want to do. This is something that I want to build on. You know, I think it's relevant and I think it's important. And again, I think it's healing. So thank you very much. I hope you have a fantastic day, and always remind yourself you are not a bad person. You are just an addict. Okay? The real you is in there, you know, and if you are suffering, as I've said, the help is out there. You don't have to suffer alone. You never have to be alone ever again. So thanks for tuning in, and we're going to move on to our meditation part. So if you are ready to go, I hope you're sitting comfortably, or if you're lying down. The first thing again that I want you to do, I want you to take a nice deep breath. So like we did before, we're going to breathe in for 7 seconds. And we'll call this the in-breath. And breathe out nice and relaxed, and we'll call this the out-breath. So on the in-breath and on the out-breath, preparing yourself to become relaxed. As you breathe in and as you breathe out, you begin to feel your feet becoming heavy, almost expanding as you relax. On the in-breath and on the out-breath. Your legs beginning to relax, beginning to come heavy. Your torso, your bum, on the in-breath and on the out-breath, just relax. And as you're breathing in and as you're breathing out, try and bring your focus back to your breathing. If your mind wanders, that's okay. Just acknowledge your thoughts and bring yourself back to your breathing. On the in-breath and on the out-breath. More and more relaxed as your head becomes heavy, your jaw, your shoulders, everything is relaxed. And once again today, I want you to pick the one thing today that's weighing heavy on your mind. And that heaviness is carrying itself all the way down to your chest, and it feels heavy on your chest. Whatever it is you're worrying about, whatever the concern is, whatever the anxiety may be, I want you to picture what this is. And I want you to picture this as just words. They can be words on a piece of paper. And I want you to try and visualize now that beside you, you have an envelope. I want you to take these words on the piece of paper and I want you to place them in the envelope. What I want you to do now with this envelope is I want you to try to visualize in front of you there's a small fire. And on your next breath in and on your next breath out, I want you to say to yourself, the contents of this envelope are no longer mine to carry. And I want you now to place the envelope on the fire. And in your mind, I want you to watch as it burns away into ash. And as the smoke rises, I want you to understand that this worry, this anxiety, this smoke is being carried away now, off out into the universe where it can no longer do any harm to you or to anybody else. And on the in-breath and on the out-breath, you feel more and more relaxed as this smoke disappears and becomes nothing. On the in-breath and on the out-breath, you feel the weight lifted from your chest. You feel as you take a deep breath in, you can breathe again. You feel lighter again. That worry is no longer yours to carry today. On the in-breath and on the out-breath, more and more relaxed, happier, lighter. And as you breathe in again now, I want you to start to bring your awareness back to your body. And as you breathe out, your awareness is back to your feet, back to your legs. You can start to move your hands again, move your toes, roll your shoulders. As you breathe in and as you breathe out, you begin to move your head again. And on the next big breath in and breath out, you slowly open your eyes and bring your awareness back to the room around you or back to your surroundings. And just sit for a moment with that freedom, with that lightness, that airiness that's all around you, because that worry is no longer yours to carry today. So once again, thank you very much for listening in today. It has been my pleasure. I'm Mike and I'm an addict, and I will speak to you on the next episode of Once Upon a Time in Addiction.